The email came at 8:12 a.m. Not a meeting request, not a heads up, just a subject line that didn't belong in a normal workday. Organizational restructuring update. I opened it sitting at my desk, coffee still untouched, inbox barely cleared, expecting the usual corporate noise about efficiency, alignment, or whatever new buzzword management had picked this quarter. Instead, I read the same line 3 times before it actually sank in. Our department's functions are being transitioned to an external partner effective immediately. Immediately. That word doesn't leave room for discussion, or dignity, or even time to process what just happened. I leaned back slowly, staring at the screen, while the office around me stayed oddly normal. People typing, talking quietly, moving between desks like nothing had changed, like we hadn't just been erased in a single paragraph. Then the second email hit. Mandatory meeting. 10 minutes. No agenda. That told me everything I needed to know. By the time we all gathered in the conference room, the mood had shifted. No one was joking, no one was checking their phones, no one was pretending this was routine. We all knew something was off, we just didn't know how bad it was yet. Then he walked in. Calm. Composed. Like he had rehearsed this. "Thank you for joining on short notice," he said, taking his usual spot at the front of the room. No one responded. He clicked once, bringing up a slide that didn't explain anything but looked important enough to justify what was coming. "As you've seen in the communication," he continued, "we've made a strategic decision to outsource core operational functions to a specialized vendor." Vendor. That word hit harder than it should have, because it meant one thing: we were replaceable, or at least he thought we were. "What does that mean for us?" someone asked from the back. He didn't hesitate. "It means your roles are being eliminated," he said. Just like that. Flat. Clean. Final. A few people shifted in their seats. One person actually let out a quiet laugh, not because it was funny, but because sometimes that's the only reaction left when something doesn't make sense. "When?" I asked. He looked directly at me. "Effective today," he replied. Of course it was. There's always a moment in situations like that where everything slows down, not because time actually changes, but because your brain is trying to catch up to something it wasn't prepared for. I wasn't angry, not yet, just focused. "Who's the vendor?" I asked. He clicked again, bringing up a logo, a company I had never heard of. That wasn't surprising. What was surprising was what came next. "They'll be taking over all systems, processes, and assets related to your department," he said. Assets. That word didn't belong there, not the way he used it. "Define assets," I said. He glanced at me briefly, then answered like it was obvious. "Documentation, workflows, proprietary tools, internal frameworks, everything necessary to ensure continuity." There it was. That was the problem. Because everything he just listed wasn't theirs to give away. Not all of it. And definitely not the part that mattered most. "You don't own all of that," I said. The room went quiet. Not tense, not loud, just still. Because nobody had pushed back yet. Until now. He tilted his head slightly, like he didn't expect that response. "Everything developed under this organization is company property," he said. "That's not accurate," I replied. "It is," he said, more firmly this time. I shook my head once. "Not the core system," I said. A few people glanced at me, because now they were paying attention. Not to him, to me. "The core system was built before this department existed," I continued. "It was licensed, not transferred." He didn't respond immediately, which told me he wasn't as certain as he sounded. "We have legal clearance," he said finally. "For what?" I asked. "To transition operations," he replied. "That's not what I asked," I said. Now it was different. Now it wasn't a presentation. It was a conversation, and he wasn't in full control of it anymore. "You're overcomplicating this," he said. "No," I replied. "You're oversimplifying it." Another pause. Because now he had 2 options. Address it, or ignore it. He chose the second. "We'll handle any technical dependencies during the transition," he said, moving on like the issue didn't exist. That was a mistake, because this wasn't a technical dependency. It was ownership. And ownership doesn't disappear just because someone decides to outsource. The meeting ended shortly after that. No discussion, no negotiation, just instructions. Return equipment, clear desks, exit by end of day. Efficient, cold, final. Most people left quietly, some frustrated, some confused, some already on their phones trying to figure out what came next. I didn't rush. I went back to my desk, sat down, and opened my laptop again. Not my work laptop, my personal one. Because that's where the original files were, the ones that mattered, the ones that proved exactly what I had just said in that room. The core system wasn't theirs. It never had been. It was licensed under specific terms, tied to usage, not ownership, with clear boundaries about distribution, replication, and third-party access. And outsourcing? That crossed every single one of those boundaries. I leaned back, staring at the screen again, but this time for a different reason. Because now it wasn't about losing a job, it wasn't about being replaced, it was about something much bigger. They had just handed over something they didn't have the right to give, and they didn't even realize it. Yet. The first sign that something had gone wrong didn't come from management. It came from the silence. Not the peaceful kind, not the end-of-day quiet when everyone logs off, but the kind that spreads when a system that's supposed to be running isn't. No alerts, no updates, no normal activity, just nothing where something should be. I saw it before they did. Because even though my access to the company systems had technically been scheduled for termination, it hadn't happened yet. There's always a delay in these things, a small window where everything is in transition and nothing is fully locked down. And in that window, I could still see everything. The vendor had already started their rollout. New credentials issued, access requests initiated, scripts being deployed. On paper, it looked organized. In reality, it was falling apart. The first error showed up in the logs barely an hour after the meeting ended. It wasn't dramatic, just a failed authentication attempt tied to one of the core modules, then another, then a cascade. One service couldn't initialize because it couldn't verify a license key. Another tried to call a dependency that no longer responded. A third simply timed out and shut itself down after repeated failures. Individually, they didn't look catastrophic. Together, they were. Because they all pointed to the same thing, the core system. The one I had mentioned. The one he ignored. I didn't intervene. Didn't log in. Didn't fix anything. I just watched. Because this wasn't a bug. It was a boundary being enforced. By design. By agreement. By the very structure of what they had just tried to transfer. By early afternoon, the email started. First internal, then marked urgent, then flagged high priority. Subject lines shifting from minor issue to system instability to critical failure in a matter of hours. And then came the meeting request. Not for everyone this time. Just me. That told me everything. I joined 5 minutes late, not to make a point, just because I could. He was already there. So was someone I didn't recognize, probably from the vendor, judging by the tone and the way he kept glancing at his screen like he was trying to fix something in real time. "We're experiencing some issues with the transition," my boss said as soon as I connected. Some issues. That was one way to describe it. "What kind of issues?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "System access inconsistencies," he replied. "Certain components aren't responding as expected." The vendor rep jumped in quickly. "We're unable to initialize core services due to licensing restrictions," he said. "It appears access is being blocked at a foundational level." There it was, finally. Out loud. I nodded slightly. "That would happen," I said. My boss frowned. "What do you mean?" "It means the system is doing exactly what it was built to do," I replied. "And what is that?" he asked. "Restrict unauthorized use," I said. "This isn't unauthorized," he snapped. "We own the system." "No," I said calmly. "You use the system." Silence. Short, but sharp. The vendor rep shifted slightly, clearly uncomfortable now that the conversation had moved beyond technical troubleshooting. "We were told all assets had been transferred," he said carefully. "They weren't," I replied. My boss leaned forward. "We have full operational rights," he insisted. "You have usage rights," I corrected, "under specific conditions." "And what conditions are those?" he asked, his tone tightening. "No third-party access without licensing extension," I said. "No replication outside defined infrastructure. No transfer of core modules." The vendor rep stopped typing. Completely, because now he understood, or at least, he was starting to. "That wasn't disclosed," he said slowly. I looked at him. "It's in the original agreement," I replied. He glanced at my boss. My boss didn't look back, which told him everything. "This is a temporary issue," my boss said quickly. "We'll resolve it." "No," I said. "You won't." That hit. Harder than anything else I had said. "Excuse me?" he asked. "You can't resolve a licensing violation by pushing harder," I replied. "The system won't allow it." "We'll override it," he said. I almost smiled. "You can try," I said. That didn't help, because now the confidence he walked into the call with was gone. Not completely, but enough. "What do you want?" he asked. There it was again. The same question that always comes up when control starts slipping. But this time, it wasn't about negotiation. Nothing, I said. That threw him off. Then fix it, he said. I can't, I replied. Why not? He demanded. Because I don't work there anymore, I said. Another pause. Longer this time, because now the reality of what he had done was catching up. You built it, he said. I licensed it, I corrected. You're obligated to support it, he added. No, I said. I'm not. The vendor rep leaned back slightly, clearly recalculating everything he thought this project was. What happens if this isn't resolved? He asked. I didn't answer immediately. I let the question sit, because the answer wasn't complicated. But it mattered. A shutdown, I said finally. Of what? My boss asked. Everything that depends on it, I replied. And that was the moment it clicked. Not fully, not completely, but enough. Because now this wasn't a delay. It wasn't a technical issue. It wasn't something they could escalate internally and fix with a late-night push. It was structural, legal, and already in motion. You're saying we can't operate? He asked. I'm saying you're operating outside your rights, I replied. Silence again. He didn't argue this time, didn't push back, didn't try to reframe it, because there wasn't a version of this that worked in his favor anymore. We'll be in touch, he said finally. I nodded once. I'm sure you will, I replied. The call ended. Just like that. No resolution, no fix, no control, and as I closed my laptop, I checked the time. Because now, it wasn't about if things would escalate, it was about how fast, and based on what I had just seen, it wouldn't take long. By the next morning, the situation had moved past confusion. It was now visible. Not just inside the company, not just in internal emails or urgent calls, but in the numbers. Systems that should have been processing normally were stalled. Timelines were slipping, and anything tied to the core platform had slowed to a crawl. And when operations slow down like that, money follows. Fast. I didn't need inside access to know what was happening anymore. You can tell from the outside when a system that supports multiple layers of business starts failing. Deadlines get missed, clients start asking questions, and suddenly the problem isn't technical. It's financial. The first call came mid-morning. Not from him this time, from legal. That told me everything had escalated exactly the way I expected. Their tone was different from his, measured, controlled, careful with every word. They weren't trying to argue or assert authority. They were trying to understand exactly where the line had been crossed and how far past it they had gone. We'd like to review the original licensing terms, she said. You have them, I replied. We'd like clarification, she added. Of course they did, because somewhere between the decision to outsource and the moment the system stopped cooperating, someone had realized that what they thought they owned, they didn't. I walked them through it, calmly, clearly, no emotion, no exaggeration, just the facts. The system had been licensed for internal use only. No third-party access without extension. No transfer of core components. No replication outside defined infrastructure. Every one of those conditions had been violated. Not accidentally, not vaguely, directly. There was a pause on the other end when I finished. Not long, but long enough. And the impact of those violations? She asked. I didn't rush the answer, because this part mattered. Loss of access, I said. System restriction, potential damages depending on scope. Damages, she repeated. Yes, I said. Another pause, because now they weren't just dealing with a failed transition, they were dealing with liability. How would this be resolved? She asked. There are two paths, I replied. Reinstate the original terms and remove third-party access immediately, or renegotiate under a new agreement. And if neither happens? She asked. Then the system remains restricted, I said. Simple, direct, unavoidable. The call ended shortly after that. No promises, no decisions, just movement behind the scenes. And that's when things started getting worse for them. Because while they were trying to figure out how to fix it, the impact kept spreading. Projects stalled. Clients pulled back. Penalties kicked in. Every hour that passed without a resolution added to the cost, not gradually, but exponentially. Because systems like that don't just support one function, they support everything built on top of them. And once that foundation starts failing, everything above it follows. By the afternoon, the second call came. This time, he was on it again. But he wasn't leading the conversation anymore. He wasn't confident. He wasn't composed. He sounded smaller. We need to resolve this quickly, he said. I agree, I replied. Then restore access, he said. I can't do that under current conditions, I replied. Then what conditions? He asked, the edge in his voice replaced by something else now. Pressure. Remove the vendor, I said. Acknowledge the breach, and negotiate a proper extension. Silence. Because that wasn't what he wanted to hear. That meant undoing everything he had just done. Publicly, internally, financially. That's not feasible, he said. It's the only option, I replied. The legal representative stepped in before he could respond again. We're evaluating all possible solutions, she said, but we need to understand the scale of potential damages. I didn't answer immediately, because this was the part they had avoided thinking about. Until now. It depends on duration and impact, I said finally. But based on current usage and breach scope, it's already significant. How significant? She asked. I gave her a number. Not inflated, not exaggerated, just accurate. And when I said it, no one spoke. Because it wasn't small. It wasn't something you could write off as a mistake or absorb quietly. It was the kind of number that shows up in reports, that gets questioned, that forces explanations. That's substantial, she said carefully. Yes, I replied. Another pause. Longer this time. Because now they were fully in it. Not just dealing with a problem, dealing with consequences. We'll need to move quickly, she said. You already did, I replied. That ended the call, not with resolution, but with understanding. And that was enough. By the end of the week, the changes were obvious. The vendor was gone. Quietly removed. No announcement, no explanation. Just gone. The department restructuring, reversed. Not publicly, but internally. Positions reopened. Systems restored to their original state, under the original terms, because they didn't have another choice. As for him, he didn't last much longer. Decisions like that don't stay contained. Not when they cost what this one did. Not when they expose gaps that big. I heard he was transitioned out, which is corporate language for something much simpler. He lost his position, quietly, just like everything else. And me? I didn't go back. Not as an employee. That part was over. But the system, the one that mattered, it stayed exactly where it had always been, under control, under agreement, under terms that couldn't be ignored anymore. Because the difference between thinking you own something and actually having the right to use it is what happens when someone tests that line. And this time, it cost them millions to find out where it was. How did you like the story? Please like, share and subscribe my YouTube channel for more interesting HOA stories.